Well, we've got a great program today. It's always great when one of our own members is able to come and speak with us. So we had Josh Farrar scheduled originally for our program back in March, right after the coronavirus shut us all down. And we actually talked about doing a Zoom meeting that day, and he said that his presentation would be better in person. But you saw the little bio that Mara sent out, but I just thought this was interesting, John. Josh is a former educator, taught English language arts for Dallas Independent School District, works as a professional speechwriter. I might need that help sometime, so I'll have to keep that. Crafting keynotes for professional athletes and business executives such as Darren Woodson and Carly Patterson, while leading the development projects at North Texas for Great Hearts. He's also pursuing a doctorate degree at the University of Dallas. This is one busy person, but welcome one of our own members, Josh Farrar, talking to us about education for a rapidly changing world. Josh, come on up.
Mr. Alsop.
Glad you're here.
Thank you everyone for having me here today. It's great to be here. This is my first Rotary meeting, as Mr. Alsop mentioned, since the COVID crisis began. I can't tell you how happy I am to be out of my house and out of hiding and back out in the public again. I got a haircut this morning, I'll be honest with you. I looked a little crazy before I came here. As someone who is in public education and dedicated to public education, I'm going to be focusing on an education topic today, and I'm going to be presenting a specific angle, a specific view of it. Now, I know that there are many people in the room and on our Zoom call that are in different aspects of education, and so I want to say up front that no single school or educational philosophy has everything figured out. There's a lot that we can learn from each other, and I think a dialogue about how schools are run and how curriculum is done and how kids are taught is crucial. What I'm going to do today is to simply present the angle that I come from and that my organization comes from and some of the strengths that we have and how I think it speaks to the time that we're in. I'd like to begin today by pointing out something obvious, and we can kick over to the PowerPoint if we can. I don't know if that's going to work technically, pop up on the screen to see how Jordan does this. I'm amazed at the technical moves being pulled in the room today. It's amazing stuff. I'm starting out with something obvious, and that is just how incredible the world is right now. Everything that is going on, we're all talking about it at our tables as the event is beginning, and it's hard not to get past it in small talk. We're in an incredible point in history. So much is happening before our eyes. I'm a young man, and so many of you remember much more than I do, but I've never seen a time in the world where so much is happening all at once, where so much crisis and change is unfolding. And we're in a time of immense change. And the future is arriving very fast. That's my next slide. The future is arriving very fast. There is a book that has come out recently. I highly recommend it. It's called The Future is Faster Than You Think. And it is about what is about to come. Now, we're already going through a crazy time, but what's next is even more incredible. We're looking at really amazing political change that is going on. We're at a uniquely divided time in our country. What's going to happen over the next 10, 15 years in the political landscape? What's going to happen in the social landscape? What's going to happen on a global scale with natural events that are occurring? What about man-made global events, international conflicts, countries in conflict with one another and shifting ties on a global scale? The future feels like a very significant, serious thing. If you reflect on it very long, it can make you nervous and anxious. But another category you have to consider is technology. How much technology is changing our world? The book that I just mentioned, The Future is Coming Faster Than You Think, talks about how if you think a lot of change has already happened, just buckle in your seatbelt, because what's about to happen is going to make it look small. There's this thing called convergence that's happening right now, where in multiple fields at once, technological advances are overlapping. And what it's creating, in short, is an explosion of advances. There are predictions that are quite serious. In the next 3 to 5 to 7 years, we're going to see not just automated cars, but flying cars, believe it or not. Dallas is a target city for this. Flying cars. We're seeing AI and robotics, incredible advances in genetics. The tools that we're holding now, that we see kids walking around with, that we're all using, have they not changed our lives? That small change has been incredibly impactful. But what's on the horizon is even greater. And as I think about that, all that's ahead, I wonder, how are we going to navigate it? How are we going to get through it? What's this country going to look like? What are schools going to look like? What are people going to be like 10, 15, 20 years from now? And I think that we're right to be concerned about it, right? To be worried and to be thinking about how are we going to navigate this well. As an educator, I think about what this means for schools. How are we raising the next generation? Because maybe the most important point to realize is that most of us in this room, myself included, are not going to be the primary people to lead this country through the next major stages. It's going to be the generation that we're raising right now, the generation that's coming up. So I find myself as an educator asking lots of questions at night while I'm lying in bed, while I'm driving around, about what role education plays in helping us prepare for what is certain to be not a boring future at all, an incredibly challenging future. So I'm gonna list a few of those questions that I have, and maybe put them on your mind as well. The first question is, how do we prepare students to navigate and lead in a future vastly different than the world we're living in today? Another way of framing that question is the next question, actually, which is, how do we prepare students to answer questions that haven't even been asked yet? We know that there are going to be some incredible challenges from the technology that's coming our way. Questions about privacy that we're already facing. Questions about free speech and censorship. We're going to see new advances get rid of entire markets and entire workforces. What's that new reality going to be like? How do we prepare this next generation to deal with that? That's a very important question. Let's go to the next question, if we could. How do we develop students who can thrive in a tech-driven world without reducing them merely to tech consumers? We've seen how using our phones and using all the amazing tools we have online and living in the internet and the constant connected world, it changes us quite a bit. It changes our habits. We're not as good at reading. Our inabilities to converse with one another are hurt. And so we've seen that tech does have a negative impact on our brains and in our behavior. And as tech hits our schools and as tech is in the hands of our students, we have to ask, to what extent are we preparing these students to be sharp leaders of a future world where tech is going to be at the center? And to what extent is that tech that we're giving them actually reducing them to just consumers? If you've ever seen the movie WALL-E, the Disney animation movie, you see kind of a frightening picture of a negative view of what could be down the line, of people in these robotic chairs sitting and looking at screens and eating lots of food and getting obese, and they don't look at each other, and it's all about being entertained, and they're merely just consumers, and the tech world around them does everything for them. And that is an extreme picture of a danger, which is while we're putting tech in the hands of children, that tech doesn't actually prepare them to deal with it, but actually makes them more prone to fall to its weaknesses. Another question here, which is, how do we help students become not just skilled, smart professionals, but also caring, honest, and morally upright people? How do we actually develop their characters and their integrity? And I'm talking about in a public education standpoint. A lot of people will send their kids to religious private schools where there's a clear program for the development of a person morally, but in a public environment where you have a diversity of perspectives, how do you train a child in the way that he or she should go in their character and integrity? These are all questions that hit me as I think about what's ahead. We know it's a big deal what the future is going to hold for us. How do we get this next generation ready for it? Now, there are a lot of potential answers to these questions. A lot of schools are doing great things that are going to speak to these things. Great Hearts, which is the school that I come from, is a classical liberal arts charter school. And so the answer that I'd like to propose is actually not a new thing for this new world that we're entering into, but actually something rather old that I think holds great solutions for us. And that is simply a classical liberal arts education. Now, many of you are probably already very familiar with what that means. Some of you may have received a classical liberal arts education, but I'll hit on a few of the bullet points of what it really is. A classical liberal arts education at its core is centered around what we call the great books. The books that in Western history from the ancient world on through have really guided our progressions, have guided our thought, have given us our breakthroughs about how to live and love and be fair with one another. And those great books create a great conversation throughout history. A liberal arts education teaches a child the story of that history. Another thing it does is that it has a coherency between disciplines. So if you are in an English class, the literature that you're reading, say if you're in 8th grade, the literature that you're reading that year corresponds directly with the history that you're learning that year. There's also a corresponding relationship to the math and the science that you're learning, so that as you move through your curriculum, you have a real sense of the story of history. Perhaps more importantly than those, though, is that a classical liberal arts education focuses on training students how to think and how to clearly communicate, not necessarily what to think, but how to think. This means teaching students logic and logical fallacies. It can be kind of maddening to turn on the news sometimes, you may agree, and to hear just absurd logical fallacies coming from apparently smart people. I was taught about ad hominem, which is Latin for to the man, or an argument that is just to the man. Arguing against or debating against someone, if you find yourself attacking the person, attacking the character of the person, and not talking about the topic, that's a fallacy, and that should be called out. That's not a valid argument. But these things are all over our society. They happen in all of our language and conversation, and we don't call them out because many of us are not educated to call them out. So one thing that a classical liberal arts education does is train students in logic and in rhetoric, and prepares them to communicate and think very clearly. It also, and this is a really wonderful part of it, it teaches kids to engage in what we call civil discourse, which would be a really refreshing revolution in this country. Civil discourse, which is respectful, listening-based dialogue. It comes from the Socratic method, where the teacher is not there to necessarily lecture from a pulpit and preach, but like Socrates, to inspire a conversation, to get people thinking deeply, to challenge students individually, and then watch a room move together through a difficult topic. So hopefully, at the beginning of the class, they start one place. And by the end of the class, the group has collectively shifted in its thinking, has discovered some things, has listened to each other. That civil discourse is so important for the way we're training children, so that when they become adults and go into positions of leadership, whether they're in government or in the private sector, that they can listen and lead effectively. And when they have something that needs to be heard, they can communicate it extremely well. That's a liberal arts education in sum. Now, before I dive into Great Hearts, the organization I work for, and how we do classical education, I want to tell you about my story just a little bit. The year I woke up, that's what I put on this slide. So I was not blessed with this type of education all the way through in my life. I was blessed with a good education, but not quite the one I'm talking about. I grew up in Coppell, Texas. I went to Coppell ISD, Wilson Elementary. I went to Coppell Middle School West, and then my parents moved us up to Denton, and I went to Denton schools. I was in public schools all the way up until my sophomore year in high school, just before my sophomore year began. But what happened to me is I changed from a child when I was in elementary that was extremely curious. It was really passionate about learning. I had some very good teachers. To in middle school and early high school, I just lost complete interest. I hated school. I could not stand school. And I started to drift. And I started to get into trouble, and I got into with a group of friends, and I found myself the summer between my freshman and sophomore year, I'd snuck out of the house to go to a brawl with some of my buddies. This was just idiotic. And we got in trouble with the police that night. And the police found drugs on someone that was in my group. And I got arrested that night. And then I got released. But it was an awful evening. And I remember going home with my parents and looking in the mirror and stunned at who I was and embarrassed in front of them. And they said, well, Josh, maybe it's time that you get a new group of friends and that maybe you even switch schools. And I thought, no way, I'm not changing. Well, my mom came back to me about a week later and she said, well, we found this little school. It's called Coram Deo Academy. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of that school. It's in the Dallas area. But it's a classical school. It's a private classical school. And the reason that I was interested is because they said, here's the deal. You only have to go 2 days a week. And I thought, 2 days a week? Are you kidding me? I can't stand school. I would love to go just 2 days a week. Now, this school is unique. They have a college schedule, and they blend the curriculum where you're at home for a period of days and then you're at school. And they kind of teach kids to get used to a college schedule. They take responsibility for their own work. But all I heard was, I only have to go to school 2 days a week. Sign me up. I didn't care what it was. I didn't know what classical was. So I showed up my sophomore year to a classical education that normally you don't start late. You do that all the way through. They let me into this school for some crazy reason. And that year changed my life. I walked into a building that was serious, that was passionate about ideas. I had teachers that were truly curious readers, that were thinking actively as adults, that loved to engage in dialogue. I learned, like I talked about, logic, and I read books I'd never read before. I remember my life being changed by Frederick Douglass's book, Narrative of the Life of an American Slave. And the course of my life changed from that point on. I decided as a sophomore I was going to go into education and become a teacher. And so I have the story of personally being changed by classical education. Now, the kind of classical education I was changed by was reserved to the exclusivity and special status of a private school. Only those who can pay can get in and enjoy it. And that is how it has been for most of history. About 15 years ago, though, Great Hearts started in Arizona. And the idea of Great Hearts was to bring this type of education to all, to offer it to all socioeconomic levels, to all demographics, and to offer it from the lower grades all the way on through high school. Since then, we've opened 31 schools across Arizona and Texas. And 5 years ago, we opened our first school in Irving. A few of the things I'd like to talk about that Great Hearts does particularly well is Great Hearts is superb at civil discourse. If you are needing encouragement about our world, if you find yourself down about where things are at, I encourage you to come take a tour of our school, and in particular, come to our high school, and you'll be able to tour through our Humane Letters courses. That's what they're called. In the 11th and 12th grade years at Great Hearts, you don't take English literature anymore. You're just in a Humane Letters course, and it's student-led discussions around very important texts that you finally arrive to. And you would not believe that from a diversity of students, from a diversity of backgrounds, the words and the stuff that comes out of these kids' mouths, the respect with which they talk to one another, the genuine thinking that you can tell that they've been having about these texts. And then even the way that they listen and correct one another and say, oh, that's a great point. I hadn't thought about that. This is something that Great Hearts does very well. Secondly, we do prepare students to thrive in a text-centered world. We have a very rigorous science curriculum, 4 years of laboratory science, 2 years of calculus. But what we don't do is we do not immerse our students with tech devices. We do not show movies. We don't do a lot of pop culture in our schools. But importantly, we're not issuing iPads. We're sticking with old-fashioned physical books because the research shows that memory is better when you're flipping pages. when you have the physical touch with the text. And there are many other benefits as well. You guys may have heard or seen articles that Silicon Valley tech leaders do not send their kids to schools where tech is a heavy element. And that may be, or it's likely because they know the full extent of the impact of tech on our brains. The devices that we're using are built to hook us, to addict us. So we're always going back to them. So the children of the founders of the big tech companies go to private schools in the Silicon Valley where tech does not ever enter the door. As you know, we can learn how to use tech and tech products very quickly. And so the most important thing for us at Great Hearts is to develop students to be sharp thinkers, patient thinkers, deliberate thinkers, good communicators. And we trust that they can learn to adopt the tools they need to engage in the world actually rather quickly. Finally, and this is very important, is at Great Hearts, we really emphasize teaching virtue. And not as a curriculum. We don't do a class on courage or a class on humility. We instill the virtues from the lower grades all the way up through high school. We have on our walls heroes in our classrooms and in our hallways of people throughout history, men and women of all backgrounds that emulate certain virtues. There are 9 virtues that we teach all the way through the Great Hearts education. They are humility, integrity, friendship, perseverance, wisdom, courage, responsibility, honesty, and citizenship. And that is taught not so much through lessons out loud by the teacher, but it's taught through the teachers and the way that they act and behave. It's taught through the culture of the school and the way that hard times and struggles are dealt with. And those virtues are also celebrated. We literally have classroom parties and school parties around virtues. And that may sound like the nerdiest thing you would never think a kid would do. But Great Hearts has an ability to pull it off. So we teach the virtues. And our goal is to, as you see in our mission, the mission of Great Hearts is to educate young people for the lifelong pursuit of truth, goodness, and beauty through a rigorous classical liberal arts education. We believe that the highest goal of education is to become good, simply put, to become good intellectually and morally. I would like to tell you a little bit about our school in Irving. Our first school in North Texas was in Irving. We planted that school 5 years ago, and we've just opened our second school in Fort Worth. But still, there's no school in Dallas. If you're anywhere in the middle of the Metroplex or towards Dallas, the Irving School is the only one we have, and it's doing great. Our average SAT scores are 200 points above the Texas state average, and our college admittance is excellent. The scholarships are strong, but more importantly, we're very proud of the type of people that our graduates become when they're finished at the end of the road. I would love to show you that we have that just tells our story from the perspective of parents over the last 5 years. There are going to be a few people from Great Hearts in this video, but mostly what you're going to be hearing from our parents here in Irving. These are all Irving stories, so we can go ahead and hit play. Oh, yes. Can we restart it possibly? As we continue to grow, we invite you to join us for the journey. Thank you. Video may not have come through perfectly there. I hope it gave you some impression of the school itself. Thank you for listening. I do want to mention that this is not just about charter, pro-charter, or anti-charter. We're a part of a larger movement, and there are arms of our movement that are focused on taking this directly to the public schools. If you're interested in learning more about that, there's a group called the Dallas Institute in Dallas that all they do is work on getting this type of curriculum inside public schools, and they have 4 programs right now in Fort Worth ISD where that's happening. So thank you so much for listening today, and I look forward to continuing with this Rotary Club and finding ways that Great Hearts can serve this larger community, and figuring out ways that we can partner together and moving forward. Thank you.
Great presentation.
Thank you.
Yes. Anybody have any questions?
Mr. Jadon George, go ahead, sir.
3 questions, but the answers will be brief, I'm sure. Where is the Great Heart School located in Irving? Number 1. Number 2, when will classes begin for the next school year? Number 3, will the students be taught in classrooms or in other venues?
All right, let me repeat that question for the people that are online. So the question was, where's the campus? When's school going to start, and how is it going to be taught? Put this back here.
Our campus in Irving is at the intersection of George Bush and Beltline. There's a soccer complex over there in a little street called World Cup Way. Our building is right over there. Our lower school, elementary school, is nearby on Story Road and Beltline. We are starting school on August 19th. How are we starting? We are offering all of our families a hybrid option. So they can either send their kids in person or they can choose to stay back, and we offer all the benefits of online remote learning for those families that need to have that if there's health issues with COVID. But we have recently announced that we're not starting fully in person until September 7th. September 7th, everything starts in person. Mm-hmm.
And I think that's common.
Many of the districts today is they're
Starting online and then going to in-person, depending upon what's happening with COVID. I know we're just a little bit over. I want to make sure that we respect your time. So Josh, can you stay around a couple minutes if anybody else has questions for you? So if you'll stand with me, we get the distinct pleasure of having the 4-way test done by the one and only Ken Lancaster.
For you visitors, the 4-way test is what Rotary is all about, what they say and do. And up on the backboard is a 4-way test. You can go along, and we're going to recite all of this. So I'm going to say the 4-way test is about what we think, say, or do. Number 1.
Is it truth?
Number 2.
Is it fair to all concerned? Will it be beneficial? Better friendships. Will it be beneficial to all concerned?
Dismissed, I think.
That is the right thing. So ring the bell for me, Josh, right there. We are adjourned. If you have questions for Josh, come on up. Everybody online, thank you so much. Patty, we're glad you're getting better. Laura, Bob, thanks for joining us today. Randy, Clint, Chris, we'll see everybody next week. Just a reminder before everybody gets out of the room, we do have a board meeting next week. Some of you that are online or on the board, you can zoom into that board meeting. So next Thursday, 10:30 a.m. is our board meeting. Thank you for being here.
Is this a makeup for you?
It is. I was on my computer last Wednesday and I just forgot it was Wednesday.
Oh, you guys eat at noon in Grapevine?
Yes.
Wow. So have you been on any trips lately?
No, I haven't. I was Montana good.
Andra will lead us in 2 songs, and then John Van Buren will introduce our visiting Rotarians and guests. Pastor George.
Heavenly Father, we pause at the beginning of this meeting to acknowledge your presence among us. We know that you have said in your word that 2 or 3 are gathered together in your name, you will be in the midst of them. We thank you for extending your love and grace to our beloved one. You are aware that I'm coming through some difficult days. So we ask you to intervene as we intercede for our country. No, you said in your word, 2 Chronicles 7:14, that if my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then will I hear from heaven. I will forgive their sin and I will heal their land. So I ask you, oh God, to forgive us of our many transgressions. And thank you, the members of this club, the principles of service for which we stand. Guide us and direct us in all of our ways, both now and in the days to come. We ask it all in the holy name of your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Bobby Hoss, you want to lead us in the pledge? Bobby, lead us in the pledge. Allegiance to the flag, States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The eyes of Texas are upon you all the live long day. The eyes of Texas are upon you to have to fed away. No, you never see. No, as it grows in the morn. The eyes of Texas are upon you till day world blows his horn. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so perfectly we had at the twilight's last gleam, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight, oh, the ramparts we won were so gallantly streamed, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land, the home of the brave. Well done there. Thank you all. In case you didn't notice when you came in, we have a special guest today. John Van Buren, come on up. But I'm going to introduce this, yes, Bill LaBar brought Ken Lancaster today. So everybody say hi to Ken Lancaster.
Hey, Ken.
Ken, we're glad to have you back, and we had to do the Eyes of Texas in your honor. So, Ken, thank you. Good to see you. You want to say anything to the club? Would you like to say anything to the club?
Make a speech.
It looks like the same old bunch to me.
Okay. No one's gone anywhere, all right? Okay. At the end, yeah. So you can introduce the rest of the guests. I'll introduce mine, all right?
Yes, this is Red Bud today. We have more guests.
That mic does not work.
I'm here for about 15 minutes. I might want to take
Okay. First, Robert has at least 5 guests, including a little munchkin who I'm looking at. And why don't you introduce your guest first?
I will do that. Thank you. So I have my grandson Hunter, that's Jordan's son, up here with his baseball gloves on. You know my daughter Erin. So and then these are some of my clients. This is Sandy Medea and her daughter Tadu and Bobby. So Sandy, would you like to greet the club? Maybe tell them what you do and why you're here.
Thank you guys for welcoming us. My name is Sandy Farrar, and this is my daughter and my son. I personally we are an tech company, and we serve all schools and beauty parents where we teach computer science. And my daughter and my son both are in high school, and they're very interested in knowledge opportunities right now. I also helping them, and my daughter especially is interested in
Sandy and I serve on the YMCA board together, and she inquired about Rotary, so I invited her to come and see what Rotary's about. And again, we've got 2 potential volunteers. Lazaro, they're interested in helping with the race, and they're also interested in companions, so we're trying to help them get back to both of the 10 regional schools that live here. Sandy, we're glad you're here. You want to finish introducing our guests?
I would be glad to our, well, first of all, Dr. George has his son Roger here. Roger, would you stand up, please? Welcome, Roger. I know, waiting for the schools to open, and said he's going to keep coming until that date arrives. We have, stand up, Brian. Come on now. I'm glad you're here too. I will. And as always, there's always a political connection in the crowd. Mark Zeski is a guest. He's here. Mark, stand up. Mark's running for place 3, replace Dennis Webb. Welcome, Mark. And
Mark also is the sponsor of the Singly Interact Club and helps us with the flag program. So we appreciate all of Mark's efforts.
Thank you, Mark. And Lazaro, you have a guest. Would you introduce him, please?
I do.
There you go.
He is a music maker. He is over a lot of different things there.
We're glad you guys are here.
We're now since we went through this, but Brian, welcome to thank you for being here, and hopefully it was a good club one of the things as well. So music maker.
Thank you. And welcome. And Bobby, you heard that. Bring an application over to this table, please.
There you go.
There you go.
Thank you, John. Let's give all of our busy
better make sure I didn't miss anybody.
Did we miss any? Got everybody. So glad you're here today. I want to put all of our Rotarians online. We got Bob Van Dyke in that upper left-hand corner visiting from the Grapevine Club. Elaine Free communicated to me about that. Want to say hi to Laura Manning, Bob Bourgeois, Clint Howard, John Eastwood, Rick Lynn, Randy Hubbard. That's Max DuPlant joining us there. Patty Caperton, Chris Dobson, Doreen Milano, and then Magna Hernandez sent a representative from the school district to join us today. So we have a lot of people on Zoom. We have a room filled here, and so we're excited to have all of you. Can you hear me online all right with the AirPod? Just making sure, give me a thumbs up or something like that. Okay. All right, so we can hear. I have a couple of quick announcements that I need to do, and then we're going to go to our program today. So one of the things I'd like to ask you is, back on July the 9th, I know that's been a few weeks ago, but I sent all of you a survey. I sent you 10 questions and asked for a response. I sent that out to 63 people in the club. And at the moment, I've had 17 responses. So for the 17 of you that responded, I appreciate that. it actually was opened by a total of 43 of you. I know which 43 opened it. So those of you that opened and haven't responded, I'm giving you a little bit more time. So we're not going to count your answers late. Is that how we do in education? We're not going to give you partial credit, but your answers are helping me to direct the future of our club. So I'm just putting a plug in there that I'd like to ask that. I got an update from Lindy this morning on flags. We have 1,354 paid flags. We have 613 that have not renewed. So if everybody renewed, we'd have 1,967 flags. That's by Bourgeois. We have a work day this Saturday. Is that right? I'm supposed to mention that. And I message I'm going to be there. Okay. So I encourage all of you. 7:30. Is that? One hour on flags, and I know all of you in Zoom might not have been able to heard that, but Patty, we extended our prayers to you for your recovery from your hip surgery, and we know you'll be back helping with flags soon, but do need to ask all of you that have an hour on your schedule, Saturday morning, 7:30 a.m. We're just going to work on flags for an hour. We're going to bring something to eat and drink, or is everybody on their own? All right. Well, I might bring something for everybody, all right? So if you'll come, I'll feed. Number $67,678.50 on flags. So that's a good number, but if we can get the rest of those to renew, it would be even better. J. Don George, yes, sir.
Just in case I decide to show up for work, which is not likely, but just in case, where is it?
Where is it? It is at the Irving YMCA. So it's kind of on the east side of the building. I know where your house is because I've installed your flag. So if you'd like for me to pick you up around 7:15, I can do that if that helps. All right.
I'll give serious thought and some prayer.
All right. Serious thought and prayer. Any of you online need a ride? We'll see if Tracy will let me borrow one of the YMCA. We'll just come by and pick you all up.